On October 27, 1962, deep beneath the Caribbean Sea, three Soviet officers stood in a cramped submarine arguing over whether to start nuclear war. Two wanted to launch, one refused. You've never heard his name, but he's the reason you're alive to watch this. The submarine was dying. For nearly 4 weeks, the crew of the B-59 had been submerged in conditions that would break most people. The air was thick, hot, impossible to breathe. Carbon dioxide levels had climbed so high that crew members were passing out at their stations. The temperature inside hovered around 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Men lay on the metal floor gasping, trying to find relief that didn't exist. They hadn't surfaced in days. Radio contact with Moscow? Gone. Their last orders were weeks old, issued before the world changed above them. And now American destroyers surrounded them, dropping explosive charges into the water. The concussions rattled through the hull like hammer blows. To the exhausted, isolated crew, there was only one logical conclusion. World War III had started, and they were under attack. Captain Valentin Savitsky had reached his breaking point. "We're going to blast them now," he shouted. "We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not become the shame of the fleet." The B-59 carried 22 torpedoes. 21 were conventional. One was nuclear, with the same destructive power as the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. Soviet protocol required 3 officers to agree before launching it. The captain wanted to fire. The political officer agreed. Just one voice stood between that decision and the end of the world. His name was Vasili Arkhipov. What makes this story almost unbearable is how close it came. Not close like we barely avoided it. Close like the order was seconds from being executed. Close like 2 out of 3 votes were already in favor. One man's refusal is all that stopped it. But here's what most people don't understand about that moment. Arkhipov wasn't just some random second-in-command who happened to be there. His presence on that submarine was itself a stroke of impossible luck, the kind of coincidence that makes you question whether history has its own sense of irony. Let me take you back 1 year earlier. July 4th, 1961. Vasili Arkhipov is deputy commander aboard the K-19, one of the Soviet Union's first nuclear submarines. The vessel is conducting exercises near Greenland when disaster strikes. A major leak ruptures the reactor's cooling system. There's no backup. The reactor core is minutes from a meltdown that would make Chernobyl look contained. The captain makes a desperate call. Send men into the reactor compartment to build a makeshift cooling system by hand. Everyone aboard knows what that means. The radiation levels in that compartment will kill whoever goes in, not eventually, within days. 8 men volunteer. They work in shifts, each spending agonizing minutes in an environment so radioactive, their bodies start breaking down immediately. Skin blisters. Nausea hits like a wall. They can feel their cells dying, but they keep working, welding pipes, connecting systems, doing anything to stop the core from melting down. Arkhipov coordinates the effort, using his engineering knowledge to guide the improvised repairs. The crew succeeds, the reactor stabilizes, the submarine doesn't explode. But every single man who entered that compartment develops acute radiation sickness. All 8 die within days. The K-19 limps back to port, its crew traumatized, its mission a Pyrrhic victory. Some sailors want to mutiny, convinced their officers sent men to their deaths unnecessarily. Arkhipov backs the captain. He argues the choice was impossible but necessary. The alternative was worse. His loyalty and calm under unimaginable pressure earn him a medal and a reputation. When crisis comes, Arkhipov doesn't panic. That reputation is why he's aboard the B-59 15 months later. Standard Soviet procedure didn't require 3 officers to authorize a nuclear launch. 2 was the norm, captain and political officer. But Arkhipov wasn't just second in command of the B-59. He was also commander of the entire submarine flotilla, 4 vessels total. His presence added a 3rd vote, a vote that wouldn't have existed on any other submarine. So when those depth charges started falling, when the captain and political officer both agreed to launch, Arkhipov's veto power was a bureaucratic accident, a quirk of command structure, the universe's thinnest possible margin of error. The argument inside that submarine must have been apocalyptic. Imagine the scene. Exhausted men, convinced war has already started, being told to stand down by someone asking them to trust that it hasn't. No evidence, no communication with command, just faith that the world above hasn't already ended. Accounts suggest it got physical. Voices weren't just raised, they were screaming. The tension of 4 weeks underwater, the heat, the fear, the certainty of death, all of it boiling over in one tiny pressure cooker of a room. But Arkhipov held firm. His argument was simple. We have no orders from Moscow. We don't know what's happening up there. Launching this weapon without confirmation is madness. If war has started, we'll find out soon enough. If it hasn't, we'll have started it ourselves. His reputation from the K-19 incident carried weight. This was the man who'd held a crew together during a reactor meltdown, who'd made impossible decisions and been proven right. Eventually, agonizingly, the captain backed down. The B-59 surfaced. American destroyers surrounded it immediately, weapons trained, waiting to see what would happen next. The Soviets saw the Americans saw the Soviets. No one fired. What those American sailors didn't know, couldn't have known, was what they'd just avoided. The B-59 had been carrying a nuclear torpedo with the explosive yield of Hiroshima. One torpedo. One decision. If Arkhipov had sided with the other two officers, that weapon would have been fired at the American fleet. The USS Randolph, a massive aircraft carrier, was right there. Destroyers surrounded the Soviet submarine. The torpedo would have obliterated them. And then what? The United States would have had to respond. Not with negotiations, not with diplomacy, with overwhelming nuclear force. Because from their perspective, the Soviets had just initiated nuclear war. American submarines, bombers, and missile installations had standing orders. The response would have been automatic, massive, immediate. Soviet cities would have been targeted within minutes. Moscow, Leningrad, dozens of population centers erased before anyone could even attempt to negotiate a ceasefire. But the Soviets had their own protocols. Detecting American launches would trigger their own counterstrike. Missiles would fly both ways. NATO allies would be hit. Europe would burn. The radioactive fallout would spread across continents. Nuclear winter wasn't just theoretical speculation. It was the inevitable outcome of the arsenals both sides had built. Hundreds of millions dead in the first hours. Billions more in the aftermath from starvation, disease, and environmental collapse. Human civilization wouldn't have ended entirely, but it would have been shattered beyond recognition. All of this didn't happen because one man, exhausted and irradiated from a previous disaster, said no. The Americans escorting the B-59 back had no idea what they'd just witnessed. They filed routine reports. Soviet submarines surfaced, complied with orders, returned to Soviet waters. Mechanical difficulties noted. Standard Cold War encounter. Nothing in their documentation suggested they'd just avoided the apocalypse. The Soviets knew, though, or at least some of them did. When the B-59 limped back to port, the reception wasn't exactly heroic. Soviet command was furious. Their submarine had surfaced, had essentially surrendered to American forces. One admiral reportedly told the crew it would have been better if they'd gone down with the ship. Better to die than to show weakness. Arkipov's decision, the one that saved the world, earned him condemnation from his own superiors. There were no medals this time, no public recognition. The entire incident was classified, buried in Soviet archives, forgotten by design. For decades, almost nobody knew how close the world had come. October 27, 1962, passed into history as just another day during the Cuban Missile Crisis, tense but ultimately resolved through Kennedy and Khrushchev's negotiations. Except those negotiations happened because Arkhipov gave them time. If that torpedo had launched, there wouldn't have been negotiations, just retaliation. Arkhipov continued his naval career quietly. He was promoted to Rear Admiral in 1975, eventually becoming head of the Kirov Naval Academy. He trained the next generation of Soviet submarine officers, passing on his expertise, though never speaking publicly about the moment that defined his life. He retired in the mid-1980s as the Soviet Union itself began its slow collapse. His wife Olga knew. She always said her husband was the man who saved the world. Proud doesn't quite capture it. How do you process being married to someone who prevented nuclear war? who made one decision in one moment that allowed billions of people to continue existing. Arkhipov died in 1999 at 73. The cause was complications from radiation exposure sustained aboard the K, 19 nearly 4 decades earlier. Those 8 men who entered the reactor compartment died within days. Arkipov's death was slower, his body breaking down gradually from the damage done when he was 35. The K-19 incident gave him the credibility he needed to stand firm aboard the B-59. It also killed him, just on a delayed timeline. His death barely made news. A retired Soviet admiral passing away from radiation-related illness. Not unusual for someone of his generation and service record. The full story of what he'd done on October 27, 1962, was only beginning to emerge. Declassified documents, testimonies from crew members, historians piecing together the fragmented record of that day. We now know the Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't just resolved through diplomatic channels. It was resolved because one man, standing in an overheated submarine, refused to start a nuclear war without confirmation from command. The structure that put him in that position was accidental. Soviet protocol normally required only 2 officers to authorize launch. But Arkipov's dual role as second-in-command and flotilla commander created a third vote. A bureaucratic quirk, a fortunate accident of military hierarchy. Remove Arkhipov from the B-59 and there's no third vote. The captain and political officer both wanted to fire. They would have. The torpedo launches, the Americans respond, and the world ends. That's how thin the margin was. Not grand strategy or diplomatic genius. One person in one place at one moment with the authority to say no. The world didn't end on October 27, 1962. Most people alive today owe their existence to a decision made in a Soviet submarine they've never heard of, by a man whose name they don't know. Vasili Arkhipov didn't save the world through heroism or brilliance. He saved it through caution, through insisting on confirmation before irreversible action, through refusing to act on assumption when the stakes were total annihilation. That's what prevented the apocalypse. Not courage, but restraint. The decision not to fire might be the most important decision any human being has ever made. We still build systems designed for one person to end everything. Launch codes, authorization protocols, fail-safes that aren't actually safe. We trust individuals with apocalyptic power and hope they make the right call when every instinct screams otherwise. Arkhipov proved restraint can exist in that scenario, but he also proved how rare it is. 2 officers wanted to fire, 1 didn't. Those odds aren't comforting. The Cold War ended, but the weapons didn't disappear. Thousands of nuclear warheads still exist, still pointed at cities, still maintained by people who've never experienced what Arkhipov did. Modern technology makes launches faster, decision windows narrower. There's less time now for someone to stand up and say, wait. October 27th should be remembered as the day we almost destroyed ourselves and chose not to. Instead, it's mostly forgotten. Arkhipov's name isn't taught in schools. There's no international holiday marking the moment humanity didn't end. We came within one vote of annihilation and collectively decided not to think about it too hard. Maybe that's human nature. Maybe we can't function while constantly aware of how fragile everything is. But ignoring it doesn't make the danger less real. The weapons still exist. The protocols still allow individuals to make civilization-ending decisions. And we're trusting that when the moment comes again, someone will have the clarity and courage to refuse. Arkhipov did. The next person might not.